Hi, we're here at Old Kyle Cemetery, or as it's otherwise known, Clonfert Molyur, which means the plain or even the burial place of Molyur, who was the saint that founded this early Christian foundation. And it doesn't look like much. We all drive past graveyards like this all the way across Ireland. But when we start to scratch beneath the surface here and look into the little corners and beneath the surface, we're going to see that there's a lot here that reveals its rich history. Today we are in very quiet countryside on the western edge of County Laois. We are just bordering Tipperary, but in the 6th century this was part of the Kingdom of Ossory. And this was part of a very important roadway which ran through this area from east to west across Ireland, known as the Slabs. And just in the field opposite of where we are standing now is an 82-metre stretch of the Slabs that survives today. And it connected up with several other important early Christian sites, such as Aghaboe Abbey, Clonina, Saor Ciaran is just over the border into County Offaly, further into the Slieve Blooms, Monaghincha Abbey and Rosscray in County Tipperary. We're outside the confines of the modern D-shaped enclosure here to look at this row of trees behind me at right angles to the modern trackway. And this is the remaining part of the Slabs that runs for an 82-metre stretch along the edge of the field there. And it's about 4 metres wide internally, and if you look at aerial photographs of the site, you will see that a lot of the field boundaries in the area connect up with that, showing how the road passed through this area. So who was Saint Molyur, who founded this in the 6th century? Now the records don't talk about him too much. He's more closely associated with Killaloe in County Clare, which means the Church of Laois, which is a shortened form of Molyur. But he did have a connection to this area, which was in the Kingdom of Ossory, as it is said that his mother was from the Ossory area. And his father was from the Limerick area and was probably some kind of chieftain or maybe even a king. Now this is a period where Irish society is changing, Christianity is making its mark all the way across the country, and it is not a unified country at the time. It's divided into a series of kingdoms with smaller kingdoms within, and it is suggested that there was nearly 200 kings within Ireland at the time, and Molyur's father was probably one of these. This site is mentioned many times in historical sources. In the year 571, it is recorded that a battle took place here, known as the Battle of Tulla, in which the armies of a chieftain named Ficra were defeated by the combined armies of Ossory and Ely. Moving on a few hundred years, in the year 1079, it is recorded that a massacre took place here when cattle raiders were captured and slaughtered at the site. In the year 1200, Ireland has changed a lot. The Anglo-Norman invasion had begun, and this became part of a Norman manor under Adam de Hereford, to whom it was granted in the year 1200. After that, the site went into a period of slow decline until it was eventually abandoned in the 17th century. It was cared for, however, by a local family, the Duggans, who lived at Cloncorse Castle, which still stands a couple of kilometres away. And they are known as the Corribs of the site. A Corrib is an heir to a founder, so they were the heirs of St. Molyur, and they cared for St. Molyur's shrine, which was a bell shrine, probably dating to the 8th or the 9th century, which is now housed in the British Museum. The site today is inside a D-shaped enclosure, but it's important to remember that this enclosure is actually a modern construction. There's a stone in the wall which shows us that construction started in the year 1907, but the original enclosure was likely to have been much larger and extended into the field across the street, and beyond that there would have been some form of earthwork or larger ecclesiastical enclosure. And behind me here you can see the ivy-covered remains of the church that was here. It would have been a small parish church. As I say, it was abandoned in the 17th century, but all that remains of it today are these small sections of wall. So here we have a large ivy-covered boulder, and you could easily walk past this and not realise that it actually has some significance. And this actually might be part of the very earliest history of the site. It's what's known as a Ballon Stone. and these are often associated with early Christian sites. They often have these depressions in it. Some of them appear to be natural, some of them have been deliberately hollowed out, and they fill with the rainwater. And these waters are often said to have curative properties. Some say to cure warts or eye problems or skin conditions. We don't know what the waters that collected in these ones were supposed to have cured, but it does have an interesting story attached to it. There are 5 depressions within the stone, and it is said that the 2 at the front were created by St. Molyur's knees as he would crouch down to pray. The next 2 were created by his elbows as he clasped his hands in prayer, and the final one was made by his tears slowly eroding the stone, and that the waters inside are actually St. Molyur's tears. Now, this is not the stone's original location. It was actually buried in the field opposite, and it was dug up and brought over here for its own protection. So again, showing us that the site was much larger than it appears today. Now here we have several architectural fragments, and these show us that the church that was here was quite significant, and it had some very nice decoration on it. You can see here some spirals. This is known as scroll work, and these are carved in the Hiberno Romanesque style. Now, when we say Hiberno, we simply mean Irish. The Romans had called Ireland Hibernia, which actually means the land of eternal winter. Romanesque just means in the Roman style, and it emerged in Europe in the 9th and 10th centuries as the kings and the leaders across Europe were trying to style themselves as Roman emperors, so they started to emulate the Roman style, and this spread all the way across Europe. It was actually quite late in arriving to Ireland. It arrived in Ireland in the early 12th century, and this probably dates to the later 12th century, maybe even the early 13th century. And we see here the base of a doorway. There would have been a pillar that would have extended from that. There's another fragment from the doorway as well, and this is a capital stone. So this would have sat on top of the doorway, and we can get an idea from this as to what it would have originally looked like. There are also 3 cross slabs within the modern enclosure, which, like the Ballon Stone, give us an indication as to how old this site is. The largest of them is here, as part of the boundary wall. This is what's called a cross pillar. Now, it's very difficult to see the design on it. It has had several centuries of erosion happen to it, but there are actually 3 circles carved near the bottom. They intersect, and it has a cross in the middle of them. And this was actually only rediscovered in the 1990s and placed here. And just over here, we have, half buried in the ground, another early Christian cross slab. You can just see the top of a cross peeking out of the ground here. And this is actually a very recent discovery. It was only rediscovered in 2016 by an archaeologist, Gary Dempsey. And here we are at the final cross slab located in the enclosure, and it's actually been reused as a modern grave marker. Now, it might be quite difficult to see, but there is actually a circle here in the middle with 2 lines coming out on either side, creating the cross shape. So this section here is the resting place of St. Molyur. Now, this section is modern. This was put in 1920, but these 2 stones here are part of the original grave, and it gives us a small idea of what it might have been like. And the first thing to notice about it is that it's not aligned like the rest of the graveyard and most of the graves, which are east to west. This is aligned north to south, and these don't look like grave markers. They look like part of a larger structure, possibly the corner of it. Now, we cannot say with any degree of certainty, but it's certainly fun to speculate that it might actually be some form of pre-Christian monument that was here, of which only these 2 stones now remain. So that was Old Kyle Cemetery, or Clonfert, Molyur. And as we can see from the gravestone marking the burial place of St. Molyur, the place has been cared for in modern times, and there's a plaque on the wall as well showing that it's still being looked after by the local community. So we have seen the Ballon Stone, the architectural fragments, the cross slabs, all dotted around the graveyard today. And we can remember that this has never been excavated. No one has ever looked beneath the surface here, so who knows what still lies underneath.